Hello, my name is Joe Schmidt and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the Maine Department of Education. Today I'll be sharing with you some thoughts about what you should be looking for in terms of best practices when planning and creating quality social studies lessons. What are those key components of a social studies lesson that really engages students in meeting standards and critical thinking? First of all, one of the things we're going to want to look for is the idea of inquiry. One of the things about social studies, we know the term history, and history is actually based on the Latin word of historia, rooted on the ideas of inquiry and investigation, which is not traditionally how we think of our history classes. Usually in history, we think about a series of names and dates and memorizing them in order to answer multiple choice questions and showing the recall of that information. Social studies education has really shifted over the past 20 to 25 years in this move towards inquiry, really focusing on open-ended questions that allow students to explore the world around them and develop their own idea of what they are learning about. We want inquiry to be based on ideas that reoccur over time, big concepts and pictures that are transferable across grade levels and content areas as well. We want them to be answering questions that require justification and evidence through higher order thinking skills. Again, not necessarily a correct answer or even just one answer, but multiple venues in which students are able to showcase their learning by arguing for a certain conclusion one way or the other. We achieve this through the idea of disciplinary literacy. And the key understanding when it comes to disciplinary literacy in social studies is that we're talking about how to read and write in social studies and not necessarily about reading about social studies. If a student is just reading a text about a historical figure like George Washington, but not engaging in any sort of learning or inquiry process, this is just reading about social studies. This is not disciplinary literacy. What we want to focus on is a student who is reading and working through the ability to, again, process and think about a question and look for opportunities to learn more. This would happen in reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and thinking about how a social studies person would address these texts and these questions and what it means to be a historian, a geographer, a political scientist, and an economist. How are they approaching information and what are they doing with this type of information? So when students are engaging in the reading, writing, and speaking and listening of social studies, we need to make sure that the assessments match what the skills and the information that they are working on. Again, not necessarily a multiple choice list of memorizing a name and date to be shared again, but exploring the idea of who, what, when, where, why, and can they take a stance on what this information might be. This oftentimes means that students are engaging in a variety of sources, usually primary sources, first-hand account written by the people either in that historical time place or taking part in that event. If we're thinking about current events, economic data, geography, stuff like that. Students are to be looking at these sources and processing them through their own lens in order to try to answer some of these questions. But in developing their own lens and sharing through their own lens, they need to make sure that they're being exposed to a wide variety of written primary sources, images, photographs, paintings, artwork, visuals, videos, audios, and even hands-on artifacts that they can touch and look at. We want to make sure these primary sources expose students to multiple perspectives on any topic, issue, or question to help engage students in seeing this from different points of views of those who were involved or could potentially be involved in this question and topic. Students need to make sure that they understand the primary source by understanding who wrote it, when it was written, and why it was written as part of the bigger context beyond just what is actually written or shown in the primary source. You also have to understand the context of when this is written. Things that are written 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, and today are all written in a different context with different language and by different people. And trying to understand the time in which something was done and the who in which they wrote it and the context and the audience that it was meant for is key in understanding the documents that students will be reading. Students would then take all the information learned from different primary sources, from texts, from other works included in part of the lesson. And the idea is that they would then answer the question by laying out their argument, engaging in a discourse to share their information of what they had learned, and then taking informed action when and where possible. In a project-based learning setting, this last part about taking informed action is one of the key parts. The final result is not usually just the writing of a paper, which would also include taking informed action, but we're usually having them reach out to somebody, share their thoughts, try to do something, try to change something, and try to help organize something. That's that last stage of processing, synthesizing, and analyzing all the information that they had learned. They are now done to move forward and say, this was the question I was tasked with. Here's the research I've done. Based on the information at hand, the best argument that I can make is this, and here's my suggestion for how we should move forward with that information. So the bottom line, what we want students to be doing is that they should investigate the world around them by looking at multiple genres of sources that they then critically evaluate. They use as evidence to create a response, and then they would show their learning to this question by responding to what their solution would be. I hope that you find this helpful as you look to create quality social studies instruction with students. Again, thinking about the inquiry component, how it's going to assess disciplinary literacy, and what are the true skills of social studies. Thank you for your time.